My wife cheated on me with 6 friends right during a poker game by drugging me with sleeping pills. The woman I had loved all my life was a shameless 304 who loved whoring herself out, and she had carefully hidden it from me. This woman was out to ruin me, and I kid you not, all so she could whore herself out to my friends. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the evidence of what she had done right under my nose. My wife had slept around with people I could have sworn that held me in high regard, people I called my friends. She wasn't always like this. I wouldn't have put a ring on her finger if I had known this was what she was capable of. I had been sold a fake package, and I couldn't get out of it until she had killed me every way except physically. I needed to put this out before I would go crazy from bottling it all up. I think mine would be a contender for the most bizarre cheating scandal ever. I hadn't known that in my whole years on planet Earth that I'll get to have one of the most harloted females ever. I was this close to being a finished man because I had loved this woman. She had been someone that I thought I could trust, but I was shown her true colors. Like I said, it hadn't always been like this. I had been married to this woman for almost 8 years, and it was after our second miscarriage that she became cold and decided to show her true colors. That was when she became vain and distant and was always looking for the next party to go to. At first, I thought she was just trying to cope from the trauma of losing our second baby. And if I'm being honest, I hadn't really been there for her because I thought she was okay and I thought she was hanging out with her friends. Women always knew what to do in terms of being with friends or something. She was growing more and more distant with each day. And I hadn't really been noticing it until the day of the poker night. I usually go to play a game of with a few of my friends once every 2 months, and we just hang out and drink and play games and talk about what's happening in our lives. These guys had been my guys, and I had met them in college, so we've been right ever since then. The day of poker night, my wife began grumbling that I never spent time with her, and that she hated how nonchalant I was about getting with child. She hated that I had abandoned her and whatnot, and I wasn't in the right frame of mind to even consider what she was saying. I had just continued to go about my day until it was time to leave for poker night, and I entered my car to find my wife already there in the front seat and dressed up like she was going somewhere. You won't believe this woman brought out the big guns, tried to guilt trip me that it was because of me that we lost the baby. She then threatened me that if I didn't start treating her right, she was going to see a lawyer and get a divorce. Heck, I should have allowed her to do this. I hadn't known the evil this woman had plotted behind my back. I got guilt-tripped after she told me that she wanted to spend some time with me and my friends and see what we were like when we hung out. Mind you, my wife had never been interested in any of my friends. Hence, this is why I had never brought them to my house. The only person I had brought to my house was my best friend. I'm not trying to give an excuse for any of their silly asses, but I doubt any of them even knew I was married. My wife had wanted a hush-hush wedding. The red flags had been lining themselves up since I asked the woman to be my wife, but I had been blinded by love. We got to my best friend's house, where we held our annual poker game, and we went in, and before I could introduce my wife to my friends, about 10 of them, she quickly introduced herself as my girlfriend. Can you imagine my wife of 8 years introducing herself as my girlfriend? I had never been more appalled in my life, but I had to maintain my cool because guffaws and catcalls erupted about how hot she was and how I had landed a catch. It was then I found out that she hadn't even bothered to put on her ring while mine was on my finger like a big douche. Of course, I couldn't allow my ego to be walked upon like that, so I dragged her to a corner and asked her what kind of stunt she had pulled. And the woman had the audacity to laugh it off, claiming that I would be cuckolded if I had brought my wife to a poker night for just the boys. In her own words, my friends would accept her if they saw as a girlfriend first, and she was worrying about my reputation. Like as if I asked her to be worried about that shit. I maintained my cool and decided to let it slide. I wanted to just enjoy the night before I had to go back to work. I think I lost the love I had for my wife before this time, but I wanted to stay married and not divorce at the slightest problem. I was trying to follow the rules of the holy book and turn the other cheek. The game night started properly, and my wife was cheering me on and fetching me drinks, and I decided to let loose and relax and get into the poker. Then the she-devil struck and I began to feel dizzy. The next thing I knew, I was closing my eyes for a second, and I opened my eyes to the following morning in my own bedroom with no knowledge of how I got back or what had happened the night before. From my own point of view, I had simply fallen asleep after drinking about 3 beers. Whereas what really happened was that my wife had slipped a sleeping pill in my second drink and I had slept like a log. Also, she could prance around from each of my friends and open her legs up for them like the sacrificial whore she was. You may be wondering where my best friend was in all these scenarios. Apparently, she had drugged him too. However, I didn't get to find out about this until much later. After waking up and not remembering the events of the previous night, my wife's activities became suspicious. taking late-night calls in front of me and shouting at whoever was on the other side of the line. She would stay out and not come back till late, and even her friends she usually hung out with wouldn't know where she had gone. I had tried to pretend like I didn't mind whatever she was doing, but deep down after her last miscarriage, I guess our whole marriage had fallen apart. But I had tried to keep up and still stay married. Like I said before, she had been the woman I had loved. Currently, I'm 32 years old, and my wife, or ex-wife because I have served her divorce papers, is 29 years old. I'll call her Natasha for the duration of me narrating my experience because typing out my wife is aggravating and adding to my insanity level. I couldn't believe I had ever considered this woman to once be someone I had married. I had slept with this woman, and I think I'll need to go on a retreat for cleansing if there is such a thing. I badly needed it because the bitch had done much more harm than good. Our getting to be together is your typical love college story. I met here during bonfire night at our frat house, and I had become so engrossed in her. We started dating during our third year of college, and I had been sure she was someone I would want to spend the rest of my life with. I had been very naive and stupid. She had packaged herself up as a demure and calm lady, and I didn't like someone who was rowdy and emotional. I had liked calm women, and she had literally painted herself to be everything I loved in a woman, and I couldn't say no to the illusion. I wish I had someone slapping some sense into me before I had married her. After college, I proposed, and she said yes, and we got married. I began working in my family company, and my father was a man who always emphasized on hard work, so I had to prove myself to him over and over again by getting promotions. However, I was still focused on Natasha's happiness and joy. Of course, we had gone on our honeymoon and shit, and I made sure she didn't lack anything. I bought her whatever she wanted and always made sure she had money if she wanted to go out and get something on her own. I always tried to put her first back then, even though I was trying to assert myself to my father. 3 years down the line of our marriage, Natasha claimed she was pregnant and called outrageous prices for antenatal checks and visits to the OB/GYN. I wasn't a big fan of hospitals, so as usual, I gave her whatever she wanted and she seemed happy. We talked every night before going to bed, and she would say the baby was happy. I had been ecstatic to be a father. However, 6 months down the line, Natasha lost the baby. I had stopped work and faced the consequences just to attend to her and made sure I was there for her. My father was about handing me the company, but he said I was woman-whipped and demoted me instead. And can you all guess the thank you I got from witchy Natasha in return? There was no thank you from the woman, but instead there was anger about how I was demoted and she didn't need me taking care of her, that I should go to work and buy her fanciful stuff, so she would get over what she had just lost. Natasha had been mad that I had been demoted more than the fact that we had lost the baby we had been eagerly expecting. I hadn't said anything about it or even considered it a red flag because I had loved her, so I had gone back to work. 5 years after that incident, Natasha got pregnant, and she was the framed picture of the woman I had married. Calm, happy, and demure. We had been having some problems prior to her getting pregnant, and I was considering just saying fuck it to the marriage now that I think about it. So when she told me she was pregnant, I thought it was a sign that I should give my marriage one more try. However, she lost it again 3 months down the line, and this is when our problems escalated and she decided to show who she truly was. Naturally, I had asked her what had happened on that night of the poker games, and she had dodged the question so many times, giving me a whole summary of how she drove me home because I had been too out of it to know what was going on, and when I got home, I collapsed on the bed. Mind you, I had never gotten stone-out drunk before in my entire life. I had been drunk, don't get me wrong, but I hadn't reached the point where I wouldn't be able to recognize my surroundings after a few drinks. And I had only brought 3 beers. Just 3, and you're telling me that I passed out completely. I tried calling my friends, but the ones I was calling were avoiding my calls and ignoring my messages. My best friend had said that there had been a drinking game and I had passed out before everyone, and he had passed out not long after. He had said he had been the one to help carry me to the car the next morning for Natasha to drive us home when I had asked him who must have helped Natasha bring me back home. I believed his explanation because he was my best friend, and it was somewhat plausible. I hadn't known of the huge plotting going on behind my back. I didn't pry anymore or ask any more questions and focused on my work after that night. Natasha became super nice once again, and I should have seen it as her trick that she wanted to get away with something. Recall I had said she was threatening me with divorce. She continued with her approach but switched to lovey-dovey mode like she was trying to bring some spark into our marriage again. Natasha would cook and make sure I had everything I needed ready for work the next day. Then she started bringing up talk about couples therapy and how she needed the love between us to grow again. She said I didn't love her or trust her, and she wanted to fix it and make our marriage sweet again. And once again, like a fool, I had believed she was genuine and sweet and actually cared for my well-being. We grew our relationship again, and she said she wanted to look into assisted reproductive options like IVF to give us a child. She had an OBGYN and an embryologist who had talked to her and a lot of BS, but the end point was that I had to pay about a sum of $100,000 for a start, like to start up the process. She had sounded so convincing that I didn't question or conduct my due diligence on the procedure. It was like when I was with her, my common sense flew out the window and I accepted whatever she said without question. I paid the money into her account because she was the one doing the running around and I was only going to come in to give my semen sample. 2 weeks after we had that discussion, Natasha revealed that she had gotten a job at a media company. A month later, she told me she had a good feeling about it and she asked me for the bank account I had created for our future children. That she wanted the account so she can be dropping in her own little earnings for the sake of our children and whatnot. I was proud that she was changing and I gave her the account details and allowed my bank manager to be enabling credit transactions from her. This decision kick-started the crumbling of the wall of well-built-up lies around me. A month after giving Natasha access to the accounts where I had literally my savings because my savings were what I was keeping aside for whatever children I would have, my bank manager called me and said there were some unusual transactions occurring within the space of a week. That it had been my wife that had been enabling the transactions, that's why he hadn't said anything. But when it became suspicious, he had to speak out and tell me. Apparently, Natasha had been removing 30 grand each from the account and not telling me. When I confronted her about it, she burst into tears that the IVF treatment hadn't worked, so she wanted to try again without telling me. She knew I'd be mad about that was why she had just taken out money. And guess what I had done? I had believed her. Then my best friend came to me with the most shocking news on how he had stumbled upon videos in his laptop and found out that my wife had done a very horrible thing. Then he showed me the video of my wife dancing around people I called my friends and giving free lap dances. Then the video completely went left when my wife stripped and had them taking turns with her. I was horrified. My best friend then showed me a bottle of sleeping pills he had found in his kitchen garbage can. She had done it on purpose, according to him, and I was wondering how and what I had ever done to her to receive such treatment from her. I had been nothing but the perfect example of a husband. I hadn't pressured her to have children. I had given her what I thought she wanted, and this was how she had repaid me by sleeping with my friends. I was advised by my best friend that I should watch her movements for the next few days and not tell her that you had caught her in the act. If I sprung it on her, she would flee and I wouldn't be able to get my revenge. I took his advice and watched my wife for the next few days, and this witch still had the audacity to be going out to see other men behind my back. I followed her movements after she had packed her bags and said she was going to stay with her friends for a time. Natasha had gone to see a man, and when she was done with that one, she went to see another, and that was where she spent the night. I knew because I parked close by and monitored any movements of her car. Natasha left the next morning, and I didn't follow her. I was too defeated to go anywhere. You know when a lie has just uncovered your whole life and you didn't know how to go further from there. That was how I was. The bitch had lied to me and deceived me and played with my emotions. She had known I wanted a child and she had used it to her advantage, and I had allowed myself to be used, no doubt about that. I had been totally gullible. I locked my accounts from then on, and when she got back, I decided to ask what had happened that night again. She decided to continue with her lies, not knowing I had found her out. I hired a private investigator to find out who the men she had been sleeping with were and to tell me a detailed account of her movements for the past year, and the results I got were shocking. The IVF clinic was fake, and she was doing it as a cover-up to steal money from me, taking little bits and pieces under the guise of trying for a child and transferring them to her private account. Then she had multiple men who she slept with and hung out with when she went to go and see friends. The logs were there from right after her first miscarriage. She was a whore, and I couldn't believe I had continued to sleep with her. After hearing all these, I decided to go and check myself in the hospital, and Natasha had given me syphilis as a thank you for everything I had done for her. This was when I sparked. I got back home and I took all her things and caused a mess on the streets. When she got back, I exposed her for the lying, cheating scandal she was, and she decided to roll out the tears, you guys. Talking about how she loved me, but I grew distant and she thought I was cheating on her and she couldn't bear the fact that I didn't love her anymore. Just utter bullshit. I'm sure you all will agree that she did it because she was caught. Because I had caught her right in her act, she decided to lie in my face when the evidence was so clear. She then proceeded to gaslight me some more and went on about how she wasn't feeling love for me and how she needed someone to hold her and help her escape the trauma of losing 2 children. I showed her the test results of her escape from Trauma Fest, and she wasn't even shocked by it. She pretended to be shocked, but I knew the witch so well and knew that she had already known of her health status. I told her to leave my house and she should return my stolen funds or else she was going to regret it. That didn't move her one bit and she left my house. I didn't know of a deeper force at play to render me bankrupt. Over the next few weeks, I got a call from my father that I was wanted in his office. The original documents for an important deal that my father was banking on before handing over the company to me. This was to be his final task for me, and somehow I had messed it up. The documents were missing and I was the last person that had access to it. I searched everywhere and was on the verge of hanging myself from the frustration. This woman ruined me, I tell you. And she had a hand in this too, the ones I had trusted the most. When you meet a lot of people outside and see how well they look, you wish to be like them, not knowing the internal torment they were going through. I was going through the worst of it all. How had I allowed one woman to ruin my life like this? I honestly have no idea. I should have listened when they told me not to marry her. Somehow we got word that another company had approached the company we were to make a deal with and offered them a better deal. My company was on the brink of bankruptcy and it had all been Natasha. She had done a good job of thoroughly messing me up and decided to call me and brag. By this time, she had already signed the divorce papers I had sent her and had refused to pay me back my money. She told me of how she had handed over my important document to the highest bidder and how she was going to make sure I was done for good. Apparently, she had hated my gut ever since college, but had married me because I had money and the means to cater to all her expenses. She didn't like that I bragged in front of her with my money. She hated begging me for money. This was someone that I gave everything to when I had the opportunity. My time, my money, everything, and she had hated that she married me? I didn't know what to do to get back at her, so I left it, and you would think the twists and turns in my life would come to an end. Nope, not at all. LOL. Recounting how foolish I was just makes me laugh. It wasn't even up to a week after the phone call, Natasha barged into my office with tears in her eyes about how my best friend, yes, the one and the same that had helped expose Natasha for who she was also like her. Birds of the same feather in cahoots. Apparently, my best friend was threatening to expose Natasha to the IRS over the illegal money in her account, and she had thought of coming to me for help. But what had shocked me the most was when she opened her mouth and started narrating how it was her and my best friend that had planned the whole stealing of my important document and selling it to my competitor. And they had planned it on that poker night. My best friend went over to my house while I was drugged and took it while my wife entertained herself with my friends. Their plan had initially been to get access to my accounts, but that had proved hard after the poker night, so Natasha branched out on her own behind the back of my best friend and was taking money from me under the guise of an IVF treatment. My best friend, I can't even call the motherfucker that, Kelvin, wasn't happy, and then outed what Natasha had done in his house to me while covering up his own ass. I had surrounded myself with twisted people, and they had decided to toy with me and everything I worked for. These were people that if they had asked me to cut off my limb, I would have done so without thinking twice. I need help from fellow Redditors. I need something I can do to these two people that would make them regret even thinking about me. I had already reported them to the IRS, but that was not enough. Short of killing them, I need them to regret their actions. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to think except go to work and come back home hollow. I had managed to salvage the situation at work and everything was smooth again, but mentally I'm not well. I'm done with turning the other cheek. I hope you know that the only person you can trust is yourself. I'll be in the comments.